Alrighty. I think we are live. This is live through Starlink, by the way, for those watching after the fact. So let's hope that Dishy McFlatface stays somewhat stable today. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. I really enjoyed live streaming right before AI Day, and I enjoyed watching AI Day as well. But before AI Day even started, we had quite a bit of fun just interacting with the chat and people speculating with what was going on. And obviously, I've been doing a lot of YouTube streaming over on Tailosive Tech, so I just figured, yeah, you know what? Why not do some more on EV as well? Because I love the subject and I love interacting directly with audience members. So it helps me figure out exactly what you guys are curious about and what coverage you guys would want more of if I specifically just go live and see what the questions are like. What are people curious about? What subjects do you guys want more of? I didn't give a huge heads up for this, but I did want to give YouTube members a chance to throw their question in before the live stream starts. So I threw out a post for our members only at first. We got one from Derek Wenglikowski. I'm probably butchering that, but he asked a pretty interesting question. I actually could ramble on this for a while, but he asked, oh, I'm cutting off the question here just a tad bit. Okay, there we go. He says, when do you think other automakers will finally catch up with Tesla in regard to efficiency and a charging network? Currently, other EVs that get comparable range to the Tesla rival require much higher capacity because batteries of lacking efficiency, Mach-E versus Model Y. Charging networks need to be more like gas stations. It's rather stupid to have to pay an initiation fee and time fee on top of the energy added to the battery. If gas stations did this, there would be a massive outrage, rightfully so. So there's definitely a lot of truth to that. I think that the closer charging networks can be to gas stations, the easier the transition will be overall. But there's several questions baked into this one. I'm trying to understand what he means by it's rather stupid to pay an initiation fee and time fee on top of the energy. But the reason I understand why charging networks have that is because they don't want basically someone to jump into a supercharger, plug in, and then just leave it plugged in forever. Because technically it's at 100%. Technically the battery's charged, so why can't I just leave the car parked, plugged in for extended periods of time? Because if the charging station gets filled up with cars, then other people who actually need to charge come in. So also there's like gas stations probably would do this if there was a way to. Apparently right now they're, you swipe your card and when the gas is topped off, you're done. You're being filled up. But there's not really an easy way for them to detect that your car is parked next to a gas stall and covering it up. And ideally, you'd have someone in the gas station come out and say, like, hey, you got to move your car. You can't just stay parked here all day. Otherwise, you're blocking people in. But Tesla is trying to accelerate the deployment of charge stations. So obviously, they do not have employees. They do not have staff sitting around at every single charge station. So the other benefit to this is you have a digital way of checking, because when your car is plugged in, they can detect, okay, the stall is being occupied, the stall is charging a car, this specific car that is owned by this user is stuck at this stall right now, they're at 100%, they're not unplugging. So I don't know if I agree that has to go away completely, because frankly, if there was a way for a gas station to check digitally that a person is there and is occupying a stall and their gas tank is full and they're not going anywhere, they probably would do the exact same thing. It's just the gas stations are laid out in a way where that doesn't really matter, or that doesn't really. Most people, I guess, are smart enough to realize that, like, they can just fill up their gas tank and drive away. But the other thing too is that, there's lots of things in your car that are using electricity, whereas in a gas car, if you're not driving anywhere, you're still going to be running like the internal electronics of your vehicle off of a battery, which you'll probably kill the battery of your gas car if you're just using the AC and using the electronics for extended periods of time. Whereas electric vehicles, particularly Teslas, have all this other stuff in there that make their vehicles pretty fun and pretty comfortable for like car camping and that type of thing, which is why I guess people might be more inclined to want to leave their car plugged in at a supercharger and like use the Tesla theater or play games on it, use the AC, and just kind of camp out in their car and not really think much about it. So all of that energy costs Tesla money. So I understand why they want to charge an idle fee. I don't know much about initiation fees. I haven't heard much of that. Maybe that's an Electrify America thing, like you get a flat fee just for plugging in, no matter what the energy charge is. That I agree. I don't really know what the point of that is, and I don't know that many people that have it. Yeah, Starlink is somewhat stable today, which is good. But they've paused a lot of the Starlink launches, but apparently the next generation satellites are going to have laser communication between each other, which should improve latency and hopefully stability of the network. But they've kind of paused launches until then. But of course, as I say that, I start getting lag. Just my luck. The high voltage battery powers the 12 volt when parked. Yeah, that's what I figured. So basically what I'm trying to say is a person with a gas car doesn't have much incentive to stay parked at a gas pump with a full tank and just using their car, whereas someone with an EV does. There's a lot of incentive to just leaving the car plugged in and using it and camping out in it. And because superchargers don't really have employees hanging out at them, you probably think you can get away with that for longer, but you're using this energy, you're consuming all that the longer you just camp in your car with it plugged in. So I think the idle fees are fine, personally. But I do agree it would have been much better for the United States to come up on a EV charging standard that allows all EVs to charge at any charging station. I know why Tesla fans are against that initially, at least, because Tesla superchargers already have big lines, and now we're going to start, allegedly, according to Elon, we're going to start adding third-party EVs to supercharging networks. So that's just going to result in more wait times, and it's possible that you could have a bunch of Chevy Bolts clogging up a supercharger and a Plaid Model S can't charge because of all these non-Teslas charging up. So that situation being a possibility, I think, is scaring a lot of people away or making a lot of people concerned. But the only reason Tesla uses a proprietary connector was because the U.S. had not agreed on a standard yet. At the time, the Model S was gearing up for mass production. So that's a fault on our government. Europe was a lot smarter about that. But the other question Derek was asking was about when do I think other companies will catch up with power efficiency and range, because yes, there are other EVs on the market that are getting higher ranges, and I believe there's a rear-wheel drive version of the Mustang Mach-E that goes over 300 miles, but it requires a much larger battery capacity. And as far as we can see right now, there's very few other EVs on the market that have just as good a range as a Tesla with the same size battery capacity. Pretty much, if you want to have the same range or better than a Tesla, you need to have substantially larger battery. In other words, their powertrains aren't as efficient, or the car is not as aerodynamic, or the weight is too high. I don't know. My nose is itchy. Sometimes I itch it. But I don't... The thing is, I'm sure other companies are trying their best to accelerate, powertrain development and try to make it more efficient. And I'm sure, Lucid possibly might be the first, because at least if they're not BSing us, essentially. Like if Lucid ends up being correct that their vehicle with technically a larger battery capacity than a Model S, but they're going over 13% further than a Model S with a 13% larger battery capacity. So in that sense, you would have an efficiency breakthrough of like, this can go further per mile than a Tesla can with a large battery pack. The efficiency of the standard range plus Model 3 is really good, but that's because the weight is a lot lower, so the overall range is lower. Saw a lot of people saying that. There was like, well, Lucid Air range isn't actually that efficient because the standard range plus Model 3 can do this. It's like, yeah, but if the total range is 260 versus the total range being 500, that is still technically a breakthrough. So hopefully that ends up being real. There's been a lot of evidence that or terminology they've provided, but when it comes to VW or Ford or everybody else, I'm sure they're all trying to improve efficiency, but the thing is, I'm sure Tesla is too. So there might be like a maximum point where Tesla can no longer improve the efficiency of their motors, or they can barely improve the efficiency, and then it just becomes a debate of who can make the lighter vehicle. and whoever makes the lighter vehicle is going to have the best range. And how long will it be before Ford and VW and GM and everybody else is able to catch up to that powertrain match? I think it could easily be 4 or 5 years. It definitely feels like other companies aren't trying as hard. Like Rivian, for example, is just not really attempting to have super duper aerodynamic vehicles. That's why, they've got the big flat drop off on the back, which isn't really great for efficiency, but they're hoping to just combat that with a bigger battery pack. So you just throw more batteries at the problem and the range is good, but technically your efficiency is not as good. And the F-150 Lightning is like not even trying to be aerodynamic. I know they claimed it's the most aerodynamic F-150 ever, but that's not saying very much because none of the F-150s are very aerodynamic. They don't even have a bed cover, which is Elon has compared to being like aerodynamically almost the equivalent of dragging a parachute out behind your vehicle. Like pickup trucks are not very aerodynamic at all, and it's not a good it's really not a good idea for, well, I guess Ford is probably just trying to save money by reusing as many components as they can from their old F-150 manufacturing line. So that might help get the price down, because I will agree the F-150 Lightning pricing is pretty good. The fact that there's technically going to be an option, if you don't care about high range or towing much with your pickup truck and you just want an electric pickup for, your weekend warriors driving around town, which honestly I know a lot of people that way. My father would have been a great example of that. Is like he doesn't usually take his pickup truck on road trips. If he's going on a road trip, he's going to ride his motorcycle or they're going to take a sedan. But the pickup is just for like hauling stuff around town. So the low range F-150 Lightning is supposed to start at $40,000. Factor in the tax credit, that's like $32,000. 230 miles is not great, but that price point's really, really good. So I understand why they're emphasizing that, but aerodynamically, the Lightning is just not, they did not put in any effort to try to make that more aerodynamic. And I'm guessing with the overall size and weight of that vehicle, they're not really trying very hard to get the weight that much lower. So they're just throwing more batteries at the problem. So Rivian doesn't seem to care too much about efficiency in powertrains. Neither does Ford. The Mach-E has pretty good range, but it has a substantially larger battery pack than the Model Y. So it could easily be 4 or 5 years before they're anywhere close to keeping up. But VW has got a ways to go as well. Whoa, you take Bitcoin and Doge donations? I didn't notice until now. Oh yeah. So I don't get a lot of those, but enough of them for me to keep them in the description. Basically, shout out to I blanked on your name. Who was it? What? Oh, I'm looking at it right here on Twitter. Wajets, I don't know how to say your name. Wajeki basically wanted to send me some Dogecoin and was like, hey, you should put a Dogecoin link in your description if other people want to donate. So I was like, okay, I'll put it there. And he donated, so I was very grateful. So, and yeah, I'll accept cryptocurrencies if there's people willing to give them, but obviously those are appreciating assets, so I don't expect most people to donate those. But are you worried Tesla bot is an unnecessary distraction and will cause Elon to lose focus on what's actually important, Tesla itself? I don't personally think so. I believe that the biggest problems with Tesla, this is a great question, by the way, because that's something we talked about on the EV podcast as well. I don't think that the complications of engineering and the difficulties of figuring out how to mass produce Tesla bot are competing with the issues of Tesla ramping their vehicles, right? Like what are the biggest problems we've all heard when it comes to ramping Cybertruck, ramping Model Y, getting these factories online? It's all battery problem. It's all figuring out how do we mass produce 4680s? How do we get enough batteries? It's not just about the batteries being good enough. It's not just about the batteries having good range and good efficiency and long cycle life. All of that is relatively trivial. I mean, it's a big problem in itself, but relatively, that's the easy part. And from what we've heard at Battery Day and what we've heard on the earnings calls, it sounds like the 4680s themselves, when you get them built correctly and when the yields are good, they're fantastic. Like they're passing the crash testings with the structural battery pack. That's doing great. The energy density is fantastic, so they're seeing awesome range. They're safe. They degrade very little, so they have a very, very high cycle life. So they'll last you over 1 million miles. Drew mentioned on the last earnings call that the cycle life was really, really high with the 4680s. So the biggest problem Tesla is facing is not diversification of vehicles, which I also think is a big. I think that's honestly a bigger distraction. Is a bigger distraction is honestly figuring out how many different types of cars Tesla needs to sell. I mean, there's all kinds of people suggesting it all day. I see it in Twitter and in YouTube comments constantly. It's like, I want a smaller Cybertruck, or I want a Model 2, or I want a Model Y that has more space in the back, or I want a full-size SUV. I want a cyber SUV. I want a cyber car. I want a cheaper version of this and a cheaper version of that. Those diversifications in the lineup add to manufacturing complexity that ultimately doesn't solve the end problem, which is there aren't enough batteries, and Tesla can't build enough batteries to sell their vehicles. So honestly, what's better for Tesla is to streamline and simplify their lineup as much as possible, which is personally why I think the Cybertruck is probably going to be the only version of the pickup truck Tesla sells for a very long time. I don't think because of the demand for it and because of how many batteries it consumes, there's really no point in them diversifying on that quickly and say, let's make a van, let's make an SUV version of the Cybertruck. All of that doesn't really fix the main goal if they can't build batteries fast enough. So that's their biggest focus right now. And Tesla bot is not a big battery hog. And it also, in my opinion, I could be wrong on this. I mean, maybe it's just about engineers, and engineers is all that matters. But I think that the engineering and mechanical expertise that it takes to figure out how to design Tesla bot and mass produce that is going to be a totally different engineering team and a totally different type of employee from the type of engineers going into mass producing the 4680 batteries and trying to figure out, just mass production of, like, how do we get this powder into film? How do we get the film the calendar rolls to not break when we're making this really thin film to be wound up for 4680 battery production? I feel like those are completely different sectors of engineering for Tesla. So if they want to hire a group of 100 or 1,000 engineers to just work on robotics, and that could potentially, be a big breakthrough in industry if they're able to sell those bots, which I think will probably start very, very high and very high-risk jobs that we need a person for currently, and hopefully Tesla bot will be able to replace those. And still, even if they're really expensive, you'd be able to replace those positions, and there would be a market for it. Whereas the battery ramp is like a completely separate thing. The bots themselves, I don't think, are going to consume a ton of batteries. Probably very small, relatively speaking, battery constraints compared to cars. So I don't think it's a distraction myself. Like, maybe there's an argument that all of these engineers working on robots and mechanical side impacts of trying to make a robot in the humanoid footprint, could they be focusing their attention on ramping 4680s? Maybe. I just feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like that research and that knowledge is probably very different. And they're probably working on a completely different timeline. The people working on ramping 4680s are working right now, whereas Tesla has just now started hiring people for the Tesla bot. And those people, you could make the argument, would those people have applied to work at Tesla if Tesla did not announce the Tesla bot? Probably not, because it would have been very speculative and honestly doubtful by a lot of people, such as myself. Tesla's not working on humanoid robots. I probably said that earlier this month in my AI Day predictions video. I was like, no, I don't think Tesla's going into humanoid robotics. So if someone was interested in going into humanoid robotics and that type of engineering, would they be applying at Tesla otherwise? And it's like I said in my recap video, I do think the Tesla bot, especially right now, is primarily about recruitment. It's like to incentivize engineers to come work for Tesla and realize that there's a lot of work that can be done, and it's not just about self-driving and it's not just about cars. There's other exciting tech that we want to get into. So if you're interested in robotics, please come and work for us. And then when you're already at Tesla, when you're working on Tesla bot, they can say, okay, so I know you're working on this arm and you're working on this mechanical hand and the cameras and how you get the weight in the walking animation down of these bots, but can we also have you work on this 4680 mass production line and find some other, they need as many talented engineers as possible. So I think that the Tesla bot personally is not a distraction. If anything, it's a really great idea to get talented engineers working for you. Almost a clickbait in recruitment tactics in a way. But good question. Thanks for asking that, Archie. How delayed will the Cybertruck be? I feel like the production will go like Model 3, not Model Y. I think real volume won't be until 2024. Well, people say that a lot, which always makes me laugh. Like, the people are like, well, the bulk of volume will be next year. It's like, well, in Tesla's mind, all production ramp is supposed to always get faster. So yes, 2024 will have more volume than 2023, and yes, 2030 will have more volume than 2024. So I think people get cut up on that too much. People are like, most of the volume will be next year. It's like, well, yeah, the factory's not even done being built this year, so why the heck would there be more volume this year? Like, I don't know. That expression always just catches me off guard. But I do think that the 4680s are maybe not officially delayed, but internally delayed. I was just thinking about it this morning of like how I don't believe, I saw some people saying like, it's not a big deal that Cybertruck's delayed because they said late 2021. Now they're saying 2022. So that's really only like a month or two delay. I think if it was going to be ready by January or March, then Tesla wouldn't have updated the website, because the website before said production nears in late 2021, and now they're saying production in 2022. They're not saying mid, they're not saying late, they're just saying 2022. And when you have a vague timeline, that means assume the worst. If, just like Lucid, they said, we're going to deliver vehicles in the second half of 2021. That probably means, December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Just assume the furthest out when they give a vague timeline. And I think it's going to be the same thing with the Cybertruck. Obviously, they got to wait until they can ramp 4680s. And I also don't think people quite grasp how many 4680s the Cybertruck is going to need. It's a very battery-heavy vehicle because it's a large, and when you have a larger vehicle, it doesn't matter really how aerodynamic or how efficient your powertrain is. It's going to need more energy. I think there's a false narrative that a lot of people have of like, well, in the future, we're just going to get energy consumption down lower and lower and lower to the point where you don't, like, the Cybertruck will be able to run on lower battery capacity. No, it's like you have some physics going up against you when you're towing and when you have a payload in the bed, and there's just no way the Cybertruck is going to be the same weight as Model X's and Model S's. It's like that size alone and that steel exoskeleton is going to need more batteries, and they're going to do the best they can to be efficient with, the structural pack and the exoskeleton holding all the weight. But Elon has said on multiple occasions that like they think mass production of this truck is going to be very different from mass producing everything else, because there's a lot there, there's no paint shop, which is nice, but this whole folding mechanism with the exoskeleton has never been attempted before, and the armored glass has never been mass produced at scale. That's something else I think people forget about a lot. All Tesla's vehicles right now are working with a fairly basic form of glass, whereas the Cybertruck is going to require large sheets of this armored glass, which is one sec. Hold up. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Starlink sometimes still looks for satellites. It gets lost on occasion. If I lag in the middle, I should come right back. But yeah, I think Cybertruck is going to be delayed until second half of next year because of all these 4680 issues. Now we're hearing from a lot of different sources that Giga Texas is going to start with 2170 Model Y. And I already was thinking like, man, we got to ramp Model Y first, and then after Model Y is ramped, we got to ramp Cybertruck. Now it sounds like even when we ramp Model Y in Texas, it's not going to be 4680. So yeah, there's a lot of steps before we can get to ramping of Cybertruck. So I think it's a pretty bad delay. I don't think it's like a couple month delay. I think it's like a year or more. Basically, third or fourth quarter of next year is my guess right now. Hopefully sooner. I'd love to be proven wrong. But Cole Crawford, thank you for the super chat. I'm getting a Tesla in 2 years. Do I wait to see what the Model 3 is doing or buy a Model Y made in Texas? Because isn't the Model Y getting 4680s? The plan is for it to eventually get 4680s, but what we're hearing right now is that it will probably not start with that. That's a source, that's a rumor, that's not a confirmation from Tesla. So we could be totally wrong, and maybe all the Model Ys from Texas are 4680. But I don't think anything is really going to happen with Model 3 in the next 2 years. Anything major, at least. Like, there will probably be a few refreshes here and there. They slightly update the interior. Maybe they give it a extra display or something, or maybe they get the Panasonic is rumored to be improving their energy density of the 2170 cells. So there's a good chance that we could see a couple range boosts here and there for the Model 3 in the next 2 years. But my guess is Model Y will be ramped with the structural pack, the single-piece castings with the 4680s by the time Cole is in the market 2 years from now. And the price will likely be pretty good, and the range will be really good. I'm just not sure if there's time or a place for Tesla to shut down Model 3 production and ramp up 4680s, or make a gigapress that can do the single piece casting for the Model 3, which would improve the weight and would lower the cost. Like Sandy Monroe, when he did his Model 3 teardown, was just like, why are there so many dated techniques in the 3 compared to the Y, which has all these great things on it? I agree that I think there's a lot of room for improvement on the internal design of the Model 3. Not talking about interior, just talking about casting press tech and the structural pack. And if 4680s are ramped, why not, chuck them in the 3 and see how good the range could get? I bet Tesla, like in an ideal world, would love to do that. It's just that the Model 3 is a very popular EV. It's still like Tesla's best seller. As of now, the Model Y is probably going to pass it fairly shortly. But for now, it's still quite a lot of their bread and butter. And if they want to switch it over to single-piece casting and structural pack and all that, they're going to probably have to shut down the manufacturing line for a long period of time. And that would hurt them financially big time, because Model 3 is already hugely back-ordered. So I don't know how they can switch it to LFP so quickly, though, because it seems like Tesla's not importing made-in-China Model 3s to the United States, but they're importing lithium iron phosphate batteries and then swapping those out with Model 3s in Fremont. Maybe that transition process is a lot simpler. I don't know. But yeah, maybe if Model Y is profitable enough and they're ramping it in Texas and they're ramping it in Fremont and, they're ramping it in Germany now. So they're ramping Model Ys everywhere. Maybe when that becomes their bread and butter, they'll actually have time to shut down the Fremont Model 3 line, update it with the Gigapress and give it better range and give it a structural pack in the 4680s. Maybe when that time comes, we'll see a big change, but I don't know. I just have a feeling they're not going to do that, because they know that Model Y sells in higher volume. They know that that's a bigger market, and because it's larger than the 3, they can have healthier margins. So honestly, especially yes, Luhai, I have Tesla shares. Please don't spam if at all possible, but I do own Tesla shares, of course. I'm not stupid. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Do you think the Roadster could get delayed any further? Absolutely, Wyatt Hall. Thank you for asking. But super chat from Alwyn Art. Hey, dropping new Tesla van concept next week. Awesome. I love all your concept art, Alwyn Art. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it greatly. But yeah, Tesla art. The Tesla Roadster honestly has very little help for Tesla in the long term. Like there's really not much use for them releasing it, even if it was ready right now. It would basically be a pure marketing vehicle. We talk about how Tesla doesn't spend money on advertising. The Roadster is basically just all advertising. It's not going to replace a large number of gas vehicles on the road. And the argument that the Roadster was trying to make, what Elon talked about when they unveiled it, was like, we want to give the ultimate smackdown to gas vehicles and say that an EV can be better in every way. That point has basically already been made with the Plaid Model S, and now the Rimac Nevera is topping even the Plaid Model S, but it's a super low volume. I don't think it's even started production yet. There's a few out that are being, tested, but I don't think anybody who's actually ordered a Rimac has actually taken delivery of one. But if someone has not been convinced that electric vehicles are the future by now, I don't think the Roadster is going to convince them. So I love the Roadster, and it's crazy that they're going to fit, SpaceX cannons in that thing and take it 0 to 60 in 1.1 seconds, but that doesn't really help anything. It's like either people are convinced that electric cars are the future by now, or they're never going to be, is the way I see it. Like, I cannot fathom someone seeing a Plaid Model S with all its great range and all its great acceleration and all the great practicality there and thinking, nah, I'm not really convinced by this whole EV thing. And then the Tesla Roadster come out. Now it's 0 to 60 in 1.1 seconds, thanks to some cold gas thrusters on the back, and the range is over 600 miles. Do you think that person's suddenly going to be like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't sure before, but now I am? It's like Plaid Model S has already proven that point, and other, super EVs have already proven that. So I think that Tesla has basically proven to the masses that EVs are the future. It's just a matter of getting the price down and making them more practical and being able to build them at scale. Yeah, exactly. Like Jonathan Anderson says, the only thing that will convince most people is going to be affordability. And the Roadster does not really help with that. The Roadster is actually hurting that, if anything. It's like, oh, here's another EV that's $250,000. It's like, relatively, yeah, the Roadster's really affordable compared to other cars of its performance. I honestly think Tesla could charge way more for the Roadster and it would still be worth it. With those kinds of specs, if Tesla knows that no other EV on the market is going to be anywhere close to the Roadster's range and acceleration, why not charge $1 million for it? Seriously, even $1 million would be far cheaper than all of the hypercars it's comparing to. Ramat? Wait, what? Were you telling me how to pronounce that, Trevor, and then you write T? Rimati? I don't know. The chat is not helping me know how to mispronounce. I just have come to accept that I'm going to mispronounce big words all the time. Rimac, the big word for Drew. Yeah, I'm excited to see your Tesla van. How do you foresee FSD pricing going into the future? Do you think it will get increased from $10,000? Will it be $20K at some point? Or do you think it'll go all subscription eventually? Great question, Moo. Love that username. He's just like, yeah, the cow makes a great noise. Makes a great noise. That's my username. Rimac. The Rimac Nevera. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a cool car. It's just they're not making very many of them. Honestly, I'm seeing this trend. Oh, I think, who was it? I think Troy from Tesla posted about this recently. It's actually very hard to know what the take rate is for full self-driving. Basically, how many people who buy Teslas are getting full self-driving? Here's this picture he posted. You know what disappoints me about this chart is that it peaks in about Q2 of 2019, which was when Tesla Autonomy Day was. So basically, what's funny is that AI Day was pretty much all about why Tesla was wrong with Autonomy Day and how their old method of achieving full self-driving was wrong and gave them a false maximum. And this is kind of where the take rate peaked, according to, this is not a huge, this is not all Tesla owners. He was only able to get a sample size of 17,000 people from North America. See, that's a little cut off there. There you go. So that's a pretty big sample size. And most of the time, if you can get a sample size that's pretty decent, and then you see what the million sample size is, they usually correlate pretty well. But as you can see, the take rate of FSD is just consistently going down as the price is getting higher. So what that means is the higher the price gets, the less number of people are going to opt for that. I think the take rate is probably going to plummet now that you can subscribe to it. I think that even if you make the case that, well, after 4 years it becomes cheaper to buy it outright, it's like, still, if we're talking about over the next 4 years, if the option is between pay $200 now a month or pay $10,000 now, people can pay $200 now and then invest $9,800, and now you got to compare the price of full self-driving and the subscription over time to how well is my investment of $9,800 in anything, Tesla stock, Bitcoin, how's that going to perform over the next 4 years? Now you got to compare the losses there, plus there's probably tons of people that don't use their cars as much in certain times of the year, and if you could just have full self-driving 6 months out of the year, you're going to save a lot more money. Now it's going to take over 8 years for buying it outright to be worth it. So I think long term, it doesn't even really make sense to keep full self-driving around full price, because I think the take rate is just going to get lower and lower and lower, for the same reason that Tesla doesn't offer unlimited supercharging outright. You know, I talked about that in a video, I think last year. I think it was a while ago, but still, I remember it being an interesting concept of like, I talk about this on Tailosive Tech a lot as well. I'm kind of interested in companies that will offer like limited time. Like Mint Mobile recently had this like crazy plan where you could pay for 25 years of cell phone service at once. And the company, when they offer crazy plans like that, airlines too, in the 80s and 70s, when they were close to going bankrupt, they offered these like lifelong fly whenever you want passes for free. And they cost an insane amount of money. So the company in the short term gets a big influx of cash, but then in the long term, they typically end up losing money because people abuse that system and use the airfare. They were flying planes like twice a week. They would just fly to Europe every weekend because they could, and it was free, and they got first class both ways. So you notice airlines don't do that anymore. There's probably a good reason Tesla would not sell a unlimited supercharging option, because they know people would abuse it, and they know people would basically just charge their car for life. And their car would last probably a really, really long time too. So they don't offer that. And they just say, nope, you can get referral credits, but pretty much every time you go to the supercharger, it's going to end up costing you money. So Tesla will probably start figuring out over time that you're better off just selling FSD as a subscription, or my suggestion that I don't see floating around too often is just per mile. The lower the number you can get to the customer, typically the better the product sells. That's why so many companies have financing options these days. You can finance your phone, you can finance your watch. There's all these, it's all about getting things down to the monthly cost, not so much the upfront cost. So yeah, I agree. You can attach FSD to the price of the vehicle, which increases its resale value, but there will come a time, I think, where if they keep upping the price higher and higher and higher, that it's just not going to be worth it to anyone, even if you consider, because the take rate of the vehicle is going to be lower. If it's $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, people are much rather just going to buy a car without it and then subscribe to it. So yeah, in the short term, when FSD is kind of in its limited form right now, it doesn't. It kind of makes sense to preserve your resale value to buy FSD and keep it with the car. But I think at a certain point, especially if the subscription is sticking around, there will be less reasons for people to be like, oh, I should buy this car. It comes with FSD. It's like, I can get that on a way cheaper car monthly. A yearly Supercharger pass would be cool. Yeah, I'd love to see them have more options. Jeff Superchatted says, what podcast do you listen to? Lately, not too much. I'd probably just watch a lot of YouTube. Frankly, but probably a lot of, yeah, I guess I don't listen to much podcasts these days. I'm just busy. I'm just working a lot, I guess. And then a lot of stuff going on in, my personal life. So, hopes and promises don't pay for future upgrades. It's uncertain and can't really be promised. Yeah. I wouldn't say buy full self-driving, anticipating it to become a robo-taxi that can make you passive income within the next couple of years. Definitely don't do that, which is why I think dropping 5 figures on a software package, unless you just really love the features that are here today, like I would pay for the FSD subscription if I had a Tesla, just because I like, I wouldn't do it every month of the year, but I would do it occasionally, especially if I was going on a trip, if I was going to be out of town for a while, or I was going to be around friends and family members that I don't see regularly, and I want to show them the car and its features. I would probably pick 3 or 4 months out of the year to subscribe to it. But yeah, like just navigate on autopilot, smart summon, auto park, and the stopping at city streets and stuff, like at stoplights and stop signs. I don't know if I would be willing to drop $10,000 on it. It's not that I think that's overpriced. I think that's a fair price. I'm just not willing to drop that much. Yeah, just buy it for what it is today. Don't buy it for a promise that one day it will be level 5 autonomous, because while there's a chance of that happening, I wouldn't call it a guarantee, and that's a lot of money to drop on a promise. I bought FSD. Do you think it'll ever be added back to the resale price? I think Elon has mentioned they want it to be. Yeah. I think it should. Like I have seen mixed information. As far as I'm aware, FSD sticks with the car. So I keep seeing people say that when you sell your car to someone else, it loses full self-driving, but I haven't heard that to be the case many times. When do you think the Model 3/Y will get the same MCU as the new S and X? Don't you think the MCU is starting to age as it's a 2015 CPU? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think when there's right now that they're struggling to sell vehicles in their current state because demand is way too high and there's a chip shortage impacting them and they can't get enough batteries working. So definitely after all of that has been resolved, I don't think there's a huge reason to upgrade the MCU in the car if people already can't, if they can't get a hold of the crappy chips they need already and people are still buying them. So perhaps when they get to a time where they can keep up with demand a little bit better and the chip shortage is not as big an issue. So they got to get through those problems first before they start bringing in more upgrades. Right now, I think they're just struggling to keep mass production afloat. So it probably 2 or 3 years, I would have to imagine. Eventually, this has all got to be, supply chain wise, it's all got to be figured out eventually. But Model 3 and Y uses 2015 Intel Atom. No wonder they don't have a new UI. It's because they can't handle the software. I don't think the software requires that much, to be honest with you. Like it gets the job done. I don't think it's a huge complaint. People are like, the software is just slightly too laggy. So, yeah, I don't think it's a major problem. Do you think the Model 3 and Y will have the Yoke? Ooh, probably not, based on how people have responded. Well, they're just not performance vehicles, and I think that was the biggest argument for having a Yoke, was to say like it was better for driving around the track. So bringing a Yoke to like a family SUV that has not that great acceleration compared to the X, I think that's a fine differentiating factor. Maybe I could see them adding the Yoke just to the performance models, but that kind of complicates the mass production line a bit, so it's kind of unnecessary. I don't think so. I don't think it will get I don't think the Model Y performance will get a Yoke, because Tesla's probably getting a lot of backlash on the Yoke, but the reason they're not willing to change the Model S and X away from the Yoke is because they've already got the manufacturing lines going, they've already got the supply chains coming, and it's already taken Tesla way too long for the Model S to ramp and the Model X to even start production. That's been a huge bottleneck for them. So they're like, we're not going to be complicating our manufacturing line anytime soon. So they're just trying to keep things simple. Right now, Model S and X have the Yoke. Trying to switch it back to a steering wheel is going to take too much work / complicate too much. So they're like, nah, we'll just keep the Yoke. And probably bringing the Yoke to just a performance Model Y would complicate manufacturing even further. So there's really no point. But my guess is Tesla likes it. You know, most of the people, at least, who worked on it were like, yeah, the Yoke is good. And everyone online always complains about it. Yeah, I hate the Yoke. The Yoke sucks. And it's like, yeah, okay. Buy a different car then. Get over it. Hey, Dirty Tesla's in the house. Give me your Starlink, please. I'll trade your Tesla Model Y for my Starlink. I think that's a fair trade. Actually, I'll throw in a couple grand as well. I'll give you my Starlink dish, the whole package. I still have the box for it, and $10,000 for your Model Y. How about that? Totally worth it. The conversation around vehicle to grid hasn't been brought up in a while. Think there will ever be vehicle to grid for Teslas? From what I've seen, Tesla seems to not have much interest in that, because there's an argument to be made that, like, okay, you charge up the car either with solar panels, Powerwall, or your grid. And if the grid is out and you use your Tesla to power your house, it'll last a while, but then your car can't go anywhere. So I guess it's not super useful for, maybe it's more useful for when the grid is out, because if you're just trying to treat it like a Powerwall, you just store energy in your car's battery. Oh no, Starlink, come on. Stabilize. You can do it. See, this is what happens. My Starlink starts lagging as soon as I talk about selling it to Chris. He's like, Elon's like, you will not sell your Starlink. You're in the beta. You have to stay where you are. Yeah, no, like, if you're trying to treat your Tesla like a power wall, it's going to use up a lot of energy at nighttime, and typically you would want your car to be more fully charged by morning. So last time I think they asked about it on battery day, Drew mentioned that you need to have some additional hardware in your house to be able to, the same type of equipment that you need for your power wall to be hooked up so that you can send energy from the power wall to the house. That has to be set up if you want to do vehicle to grid. So I think that Lucid and Ford and all these companies, they act like vehicle to grid is just this extra software thing. They're like, just throw in vehicle to grid. Now your car can power your house. It's like, I think it's a tad more complicated than that. I don't think it's as simple as just, you just plug in your house and now the power goes the other way. It's like, it might need some excess. So if you've got solar on your house and you want to store your excess energy into your car and then run your house off of the car, then you're going to wake up with the car with lower range. So then you'd have to charge the car back up again. I don't know. The way I've heard it laid out is that it might not make as much sense as people think. And that's probably what Tesla's running into. Because, in my opinion, there seems to be a lot of companies that don't have their EV on the road yet saying that it supports vehicle to grid. But Tesla has a ton of EVs and home energy products that are out and people are using them, and Tesla doesn't seem to have much interest in vehicle to grid. So that's my guess, is that it's more complicated than people think. Being able to power my house with a Cybertruck be a dream. I'm very jealous the Lightning can do it and the Cybertruck can't. I don't know if it's that simple though. I think that having just a connector on a EV that can send power out is relatively simple. Getting the house hooked up for vehicle to grid is the complicated part. An F-150 Lightning isn't supplying that, as far as we know. I don't think the Ford is jumping into that business right away. They might be working on it, but I don't think it's just, I bought an F-150 Lightning, I can power my house with my truck now. It's like you got to buy a bunch of other equipment that we don't even know if Ford is providing necessarily. Do you think Elon is overly optimistic with the Tesla bot even being able to walk, since they don't have hundreds of thousands of cars walking around with sensors to train it with? Well, I think in general, Elon is an overly optimistic person, but I think that's a good and bad thing. Like, I critique him for it in my videos. Like, I say that, they shouldn't brand the software package as full self-driving, and also he thinks that a lot of things are way closer than they are. He's like, oh yeah, robotaxis next year, or oh yeah, we'll be able to ramp Cybertruck by the end of 2021. The thing is, though, if Elon was not overly optimistic, you probably wouldn't be attempting all of these things. If you were more realistic and you were more pessimistic on timelines and how hard it is to achieve self-driving or how hard it is to ramp battery production, you probably wouldn't be attempting these things. You'd be like, oh my God, this is going to take decades. Holy crap. We're not going to be able to ramp this amount of batteries for centuries. If you had that negative viewpoint on things at all times, you probably wouldn't even bother. You'd be like, well, maybe I'll be able to replace 5% of the global fleet by the time I'm dead. That's not exciting. That's not encouraging. So overall, I think it's a good thing that Elon's overly optimistic. He just has to get better at keeping those expectations in check and going after these things because he believes them to be true, but maybe not trying to sell software packages saying this will be done and this will be making you money by next year, because that comes across as very scammy, very pyramid schemish to me. So I don't like that mindset of it. It does come across a little weird when people were leasing Model 3s, adding the full self-driving package, and they had to give their car back within 3 years, because they were being told that self-driving would be done within a year or so, and yet they never got full self-driving throughout the entirety of their lease. So I've heard the argument many times of people saying, like, self-driving gonna eventually be level 5, and they're calling it that now, and they're selling you that package now because they're saying that if you buy this, your car will one day be full self-driving. It's just not ready now. My question is, how long do we wait on that before we start saying it shouldn't have been called FSD? Like, how long do we say, well, it'll eventually be full self-driving? Because now we're nearing on 6 years. We're getting to the point of, they announced it in, well, 5 years, I guess. They announced it in 2016. They branded it as full self-driving. And we're in 2021, and that still hasn't happened. So do we wait 10 years before we start saying, okay, that wasn't the right move? Do we wait 15 years? 20 years? Like, how long do you want to wait before we say this was probably not a good idea to brand it? Because if 30 years go by and it's still not ready, why were we selling a package for it in 2016? The reason I don't think Elon is being overly optimistic with Tesla Bot is he really didn't provide much of a timeline at all. So I don't see how we can consider that overly optimistic. Like, Elon believes that this will be an inevitable reality of neural net training and artificial intelligence. Like, I think Tesla Bot's a really interesting subject, to be honest with you, because, frankly, there's... I'm sorry, I'm distracted. There's an insurance person outside my house right now taking pictures. They said they would be here today, but I didn't realize they would be here while I'm live streaming, and my window's open, so she's like walking around the house taking pictures, and I'm just talking to my camera right now, and she's like, she can see me, and I'm like, hi, I'm working. But anyway, the humanoid robots have existed in the past, right? There have been companies, and they still exist, companies like Boston Dynamics that have tried to make humanoid robots that can do human things and try to basically replace jobs. That's not new. If you've watched MKBHD's Retro Tech, there's all kinds of concept art and movies, and we've all seen iRobot. I actually want to watch that again now that Tesla Bot's been announced. It's free on Peacock, so I was like, ooh, we should watch iRobot. Anyway, it's been around for a long time, but it honestly hasn't really taken off. It hasn't really gone anywhere. It hasn't become a mainstream, and humanoid robots have barely really replaced any human jobs, right? The big difference Tesla has with Tesla Bot that we didn't have before, people are like, okay, Honda's made a humanoid robot. What's different with Tesla Bot? The neural net training. Tesla Dojo, having this big, fancy, super duper powerful supercomputer that is able to train itself based on making mistakes and figuring out how to make less mistakes, basically. And Tesla is showing with their Dojo training computer, our cars can analyze how cars are driven. They analyze the self-driving software. They see where mistakes are made, and it can train itself using all of these different alternate routes and analyzing its surroundings and figuring out labeling software and all that, how to make the best driver and how to be 10 times safer or more than a human driver. Now that there's that neural net training, you can basically have the robot teach itself how to do a ton of things instead of doing manual software coding, which would be endless and probably impractical. That's why humanoid robots haven't got anywhere. Is now that we have algorithms that can teach themselves based on looking at humans and also just doing it, they'd be like, okay, walk around and sit in this chair. If you tried to program it manually, which is what Boston Dynamics is doing, it's going to take a lot of trial and error. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, it fell down. Okay, the balance isn't right. Instead, you have a supercomputer that just trains itself in a simulation or in reality over and over and over again and realizes, okay, this is exactly how I move my feet. This is how I distribute my weight. This is how I move my arms around. This is how I balance myself as I sit down. It analyzes every possible algorithm and finds the best one that achieves the task. So that's why I'd say Tesla announcing they're getting into humanoid robotics is a bigger deal than, the past few decades of companies toying around in R&D saying, hey, we might be working on a robot. Look, it walked up some stairs. It's like lots of manual writing of code, lots of manual training, and trying to manually teach a humanoid robot how to wash the dishes or do a complex, construction job that Tesla Bot is likely going to be able to do. That would have taken years, and it likely wouldn't have been able to change depending on the context of what's going on. Understanding that In different environments, you got to behave in a different way. And sometimes you don't grab right here for the wrench. Sometimes you got to grab over here because that's where the wrench is. So Tesla's now attempting unsupervised learning with Dojo. I don't know if unsupervised is the right term. There's probably some supervision going on, but basically you can train a computer a lot faster now, and that's what's different with Tesla bots. So I don't know exactly what about it is overly optimistic, because he didn't say when it'll be out. He didn't say when it would be done. He basically just said, we're going to start working on it. We've seen it. Tesla has posted the job applications now for robotics people. And he said that he wasn't very concrete about it. He wasn't saying like, we definitely will. He was saying we might have a prototype next year. And it was like a throwaway line. It was not like a concrete date. He was just like, might have a prototype next year. And we know how Tesla is with prototypes versus final production. So if they're saying prototype next year, to me, that easily means mass production could be 5-6 years out, maybe more. And to me, it's not extremely optimistic or overly optimistic unless he's saying that this is going to replace, thousands of jobs in 2022. Like, yeah, that would be me going, okay, Elon, calm the brakes a little bit. But I think he's probably had some talks from his legal team and probably had some people sit down with him and just say, probably don't say too much about what it's going to do or when it's going to do it. Just say, like, we're working on this now. So Eric super chatted and says, is the Tesla roof a great product? I've heard mixed things. I think overall, like, as a system, it works, but I think the price ended up being way higher than they thought. And that's what I've heard from a ton of people. I don't know a ton about Solar Roof, but the concept is great. I love that idea of just having tiles and solar cells all incorporated together. I think it looks fantastic. Of the houses they've done solar roofs on, I think it's wonderful. But the prices just ended up being far more than they thought, which I don't know how they can get that down or what went wrong or why it ended up costing much more. But price is its biggest issue. But that's a good place to start, That's how Tesla's vehicles started. It's like great practicality, great range, but it's way too expensive. Some would argue they're still in that phase. There's a lot of people that want a Tesla that just can't get one because it's too expensive. I'm in that boat myself. It's a lot of money. The vision part of Tesla Bot is the most exciting part for me, seeing it interact with its surroundings. Yeah, me too. I'm definitely excited for that as well. Tesla Bot seemed like a stunt for the press to distract from production delays. Well, if you watch AI Day, I really don't think it was meant for everyday people very much. And Tesla kind of knew that the bot would catch all the headlines and catch all the media attention. But Tesla doesn't have a PR team. So I don't really agree with those people that they were like, it's a PR stunt. I was like, I don't think Tesla cares much about public relations. They dissolved that team entirely. And whenever there's a bunch of FUD and there's a bunch of bad news wrote about them, they don't really care. They used to. They used to be like, no, that's not true. But now they're just like, we can't sell all of the vehicles we make. So, we can't make vehicles fast enough. That's the better terminology. We're back ordered till next year on most of our products. So, yeah, we don't care. You can write as much bad press about us as possible. I don't think there was much in it for Tesla to announce we're going to make robots at some point. I don't really think it was a PR stunt. I think it was a recruitment tactic for engineering teams. Because Elon said that was the prime directive of AI Day, was to get more engineering talent working at Tesla. And they probably knew that just talking about AI and supercomputers and self-driving is only going to attract so many people. If you do something very different, hey, we're getting into robotics and we think this AI can make humanoid robots that are really capable and able to replace, jobs. Yeah, that's probably going to grab a few more eyes, and that might get a lot more people that may not be interested in batteries and cars as much interested in working at Tesla. So I think it was a good idea. I think it makes sense. I don't think it was a PR stunt or a advertising technique, because Tesla doesn't really care about their public persona. It's like when they're talking prototype next year, I don't think they were hoping for a stock price jump just from that alone. Maybe they thought that could have been one of the outcomes, but the prime directive of it was just recruitment. Let's see. Tesla announcing a product as a stunt to cover production delays doesn't sound like a smart move or one they would make in general. Yeah, I don't think they care. I don't think it covers anything. It's like they're not not taking reservations for the Tesla bot. They didn't reveal any pricing, and they didn't even reveal a timeline. So I don't really see that as covering up anything. It's just a conversation starter at best, which is fine. They can do that. They can come forward and say we want to make robots. The solar roof tiles are so back ordered, and people to install are limited. Most roofs are already in homes. Getting the solar panels is a solid choice. That's what I've heard as well. They're super back ordered. Maybe that's why the price is so high, is just because they can't build enough of them, but they're just trying to slow down orders. That would be a good case scenario. Hopefully it just doesn't cost way more than they thought to actually make. But any thoughts on adding the no stocks on Model 3 and Mai? Maybe no yoke, but can it have no stocks? Yeah, I'd be fine with that personally. After seeing how it works on the S and X, I'm all for no stocks. You'd have to put some things on the wheel, though, which might complicate manufacturing. Like, you got to put your blinkers on the wheel. You got to redesign how autopilot is activated. There's a few things you'd have to redesign, but overall, I think it looks great. I love the Model S and X interior. I think it looks wonderful. So, yeah, get rid of them. Get rid of the stocks. I don't care. Do you think the 4680 tech will lead to an electric plane? Would that be under Tesla or SpaceX, or reality where the companies merge? I think it would be under Tesla, because SpaceX is about making life multiplanetary, and I don't think electric planes really accelerate that. Yeah, I could see them eventually getting into aircraft, but probably not when Elon is there. Maybe after Elon leaves, because 4680s are probably going to help with high energy density and low weight, which is the biggest problems you have with planes. And Elon said that electric aircraft would start to make sense once you hit 300, 400 watt hours per kilogram, which he thinks will eventually happen. So, yeah, under Tesla. Tesla's about accelerating transition to sustainable energy. So more electric planes means less gas-powered planes, which I think fits that vision better. Or maybe he'll just start a whole other company. I don't know. Well, probably not necessary. If Tesla's building most of their own batteries by that point, then yeah. I think it'll happen. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of the energy density improving. It's not next year, or it's not in the next 5 years, but I think we'll eventually get there. Oh no, Starlink, come back, please. All right. Okay, I got to get going here, pretty guys, but I appreciate the super chats. Thank you. WeText says, love hearing your ideas. Want to clarify that I'm all for TeslaBot, and thinking of a future where we have sentient robots that we could possibly talk to is awesome. The first artificial species. No, I agree. I think it's actually more terrifying than exciting, to be honest with you. There's a lot of people worried about what goes wrong with TeslaBot. I'm more worried about what goes right. If it goes well, we might be screwed. It's going to throw off our whole economy if we can autonomize most manual labor jobs. And then that's going to... I don't think UBI is the obvious answer. I think it's one solution, but I think it has its own built-in problems. So I don't just immediately agree with Elon that we need universal basic income, because I'm not entirely sure if that fixes the problem. I think it might delay it temporarily, but overall we'd be stuck in the same mess. That's a conversation for another day, but really great questions, you guys. Like, I love doing these live streams. So if you want more, please just let me know. And you guys have been super chatting, which is really great, but becoming a YouTube member is only $2 a month, and your name will stick out in the chat. And you get access to community posts that keep you updated on videos before they drop. And if you want me to address your comments at the beginning of these live streams, you can just drop them on those community posts. And you get access to the premium channels in the Discord. So those are much cheaper. They all help me out, so I'm super duper grateful. But thank you all for tuning in, and hope you have an excellent rest of your day.